missed it.
Well, hi everybody, I'm Marc Ciafardini. We're here at the 2018 Fantastic Fest. To my right is Tom Vitale, co-writer and producer of You Might Be the Killer. Next to him is Griff Furst, who's a producer. That's Brett Simmons, the director, co-writer, and that's the man of the hour, Bryan Kluger with Boomstick Comics. This movie was awesome. I can tell you have a lot of love for these type of films, otherwise you couldn't have sent it up so well. So I guess the first thing I wanted to add, and Bryan had a similar question, is
what is, like, so you did so much research, you had to do so much research, watch so many movies. How much research did you do, how many movies did you watch to get all these great horror tropes and winks into this great film?
That's so funny.
It is, you know, it's a lifetime of research. I mean, it's not like all of a sudden we crammed, 2 weeks before making the movie, which is important to do, but we've had a lifetime of watching this. We've all been fans of this genre since, we were this big. So I think a lot of that comes out.
Yeah, I think the research was more revisiting the movies to make sure that the conversations we were having were accurate. The more it's like, I remember Friday the 13th was like this. I'm just going to go double check my math on this.
Make sure.
I haven't watched it in a few years, but it's so built into my DNA. Like, I remember this, and then we're checking it and going, oh yeah, that's absolutely.
Were there like any instances where you like had like a list, like, oh, we're not doing this, but we're definitely doing this?
Man, I feel like mentally we kind of did, but like the schedule on this was so fast. We didn't really have the luxury of like, okay, let's like look at this and look at that. It was really like kind of shooting from the hip, kind of running and gunning.
Some of it was also where the characters take you. So it wasn't like we had this list of things we had to do. It was really, what's this character story, this story between Sam and Chuck, and where do the characters take us? And then how can we now bring tropes in and then turn those tropes on their head to make it an unexpected experience or a new experience for the viewers. So you got to let your characters tell you where you're going in many ways. It's got to be story driven. So there's a lot of tropes we would have loved to have played with, but the story didn't go there for those. So we'll do that the next time.
Next time around.
well, it's really cool because in a way it was timeless because you're going back to the days before technology really influenced, and you could be on your phone or call a lifeline like Sam called Chuck. But it also had a very present feeling, like we're looking back and going, this is what didn't work and this is why we're going to have a lot of fun with it.
That's awesome.
So the best thing I liked about it is you cast Fran Kranz, who basically was the Chuck version in Cabin in the Woods. Like, he was the knowledgeable horror person.
Right.
So getting a role reversal, was that one of the reasons you cast him?
We were just really big fans of his.
Okay.
And I just thought he was really funny, but he's also really likable. And I think the main thing was I wasn't even thinking about, like, as far as Cabin in the Woods, I just knew that I was a fan of what he did in it. But I know like Griff and I were watching scenes of some like his other movies, just like, man, he's just funny. Like, and he's just got a really great quality, but he's also instantly likable. I mean, you guys saw the movie, like, it starts right away, and Sam really required someone that we could identify with as an everyman, but also be kind of instantly likable, because we wanted you to just instantly sympathize with this guy. But we also wanted someone who could be panicking for their life in one breath, but also be really comedic in another breath, which is actually really hard, as it turns out, to cast. And Fran is just all of those things, and so he just kind of checked all of our boxes and was in Cabin in the Woods, which is a major bonus.
Nice.
That is cool. And so I got to talk about all the great practical effects, gore and guts. Huge fan of all of that. How many buckets of blood did you go through? How was it making all of it and actually shooting with practical effects?
On some days it was great. On some days it was not so great. But it was always worth it. Like, lots of blood, tons of blood.
Do you find that it shows up better on film to do practical as opposed to CG?
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, we use CG to enhance some of the effects, but the conversation that we had was that as long as we have a base layer of a practical effect, then we're going to be in a good spot. Because either the practical effect is going to do the job, or it's going to give us the layer to look as great as possible, and then we just kind of nudge it the rest of the way digitally, which we only had to do a few times. We did it less than actually I expected we were going to have to. The problem is like, when you're running and gunning, you're independent film, you're trying to shoot as much as you can. The practical effects guys, sometimes the gags work, sometimes they don't. And so you kind of like, okay, how do we make it work? So there's just lots of blood on standby. Lots of, as it turns out, red food color dyed peaches. Like cans of peaches for guts. I didn't know. They figured it out.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, but just lots of people got really messy on this for sure. So
Excellent. That's what I like to hear.
So we're actually glad to have the whole creative team here because I'm curious how you guys decided, producer, co-writer, director, how did you break apart your disciplines and how did you come together as a cohesive unit?
It kind of naturally, we've all been friends for I think longer than we made this movie before, but we haven't directly worked together, and it really naturally split apart. Like right away, these guys took a hold of the screenplay and they focused so hard on that, while I would go off and find locations, and they come scout the locations while I would look at the script. So we never really delineated what each job was, but there was just this kind of natural flow and fluency that just naturally occurred between us, and it ended up working out really well because there was never any question of whose responsibility is this. No ball was ever dropped because we were all kind of just barely just kind of crossing over each other's paths to make it seamless. It was nice.
Fantastic. Well, what I also liked about the movie was the score. I think I wrote in my review, it sounded a lot like Alan Silvestri, a couple nods to Predator.
yeah,
so
100%.
So yeah, speak more to that. You know what about Predator and Silvestri?
The thing about this movie going into it was that the tone of it is really tricky. The tone is really tricky, and I knew that our cast was going to have to like really help us with the tone, and I think their performances were everything that we need them to be, and more, and that the music was going to need to push it the rest of the way, and that the score could make or break it, right? Because it's like if we're suggesting too much horror in a moment where maybe it's okay to be comedic, then we're messing up the balance, right? Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of Silvestri influence in it because I really pushed that on the composer, Andrew Morgan Smith, who's amazing. I mean, it's my favorite score I've ever had to a movie that I've made. That he did it, and unbelievable. But the reason was because, aside from being a fan, is Silvestri as a composer specifically. The reason I set him on those sites is because he has mastered the art of balancing kind of dark with light. And funny enough, the Predator score, when you listen to it, if you just listen to the score, there's some great horrific cues. But there's also some kind of oddly comedic cues that actually, out of context, you're like, wait, he's got like these like plucky strings and all this stuff for these guys in the jungle. Like, what is going on? And even with like Back to the Future, like, you know, there's some kind of intense, scary stuff, like tracks in the score as well. And so I more just kind of set Andrew's sights on like, hey, like, I feel like these are scores that show a really good balance of scary and horror and also comedy and levity. Take that and let's just apply your version of whatever that is to our movie, just using that as kind of an example of how it can be done, basically. Mm-hmm. It's really funny that you noticed that, though, because I'm really happy with that.
Yeah, I think a big part of that movie is the score and the song. You know, I love it. That's so awesome. Much. Yeah,
I'm so glad.
It is good. I'm very curious on the titles of the kill counts, the death counts. Whose idea was that, and what? Is that always part of it? Because I thought that was great.
Yeah, it's in the script.
Yeah, I mean, first the title in some ways. So the movie's told in flashback, and I don't know if a slasher movie has ever been told in flashback before this way. And just keeping the whole nature of what was going on straight was very hard. So at first, when we're writing this thing, we're like, all right, how many people are dead now? Oh, we're back in this part of the movie. What's the kill count here? What's the kill count? And as you start creating and you're in the development, you're like, hey, let's just write it down in the notes almost. Oh, dead counts is right now 5. Oh, dead counts was 2. Now at this point it's 7. Like,
and in the original script, the timestamp was included too. We decided the timestamp was too much information. It would be like Friday 11 p.m. Dead Counselors 4. Yeah. And then we just abbreviated it.
But it sort of just developed along the way. It's like, we need this because we're writing it. We need to know where we are. And it's like, oh, that's pretty funny. And we did have the timestamp just to keep our heads straight. And you just keep developing, and then you're like, that works. And that's part of it. I mean, there's so much that we did that we throw out and so much that we did that we kept.
Yeah.
Cool.
There's a lot of the fluidity of like just the conversations we were having as fans kind of developing this. Because like Griff said, like we had the timestamps and stuff, but we realized all along we knew we needed a clock, right? Because just going back and forth we needed a clock. But as we were going, we realized, wait a second, like the body count is the clock. like in these horror movies, like whenever you sit down and watch a straight horror movie, it's like, what part of the movie is it? Oh, 3 people are dead. Like, oh, okay, so you're halfway through.
We were so like use a cliche, into the weeds on it, that we didn't realize that it was Griff who then looked and said, "Wait, you don't need the clock." And they're like, "Oh, you're right."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
and
that's
then,
why
like,
the three of us worked so well together.
it was still confusing though, because even I think Brett and you caught some errors even when we locked the picture. We had to redeliver the movie because we're like, oh shit, there's a wrong dead counselor card 45 minutes in.
I was
we had to open back up the movie.
watching the final layoff of the movie, yeah, and it's like that's how meticulous. Like, guys, it's a headache. Like, don't make a non-linear movie. Like, don't do it. Like, like we're watching the movie. Like at the end, is like it was like the timer came up and clicked. And I'm like, oh cool, wait. And I stopped it. I was like counting. I was like, oh no, yeah.
Remember, there's some people who are in the count who aren't really dead. So there's stuff that changes
Right.
too without giving too much away.
It was like,
so
we didn't see that one on the screen yet, but they are dead now, so we need to. Oh, that's horrible.
Are they dead? Are they not dead? Yeah.
I'm glad you guys liked it. It was a headache.
But that was done on purpose. That was done because we wanted to do stuff that hadn't been done before in a slasher movie. I mean, between taking some of these tropes and twisting them around, and also making this lead character who might be a killer your sympathetic protagonist. So that was something that was very intentional. How much can we do that hasn't been done before? And how do you make it all work together at once? So a lot of what happened here was in the discussions that the three of us had planning this. And then also discussing it with the real Sam and Chuck, the guys who had the Twitter thread who started this whole thing, Sam Sykes and Chuck Wendig. And anyone who's watching this, go and Google Chuck Wendig Twitter thread.
It's awesome.
And that's kind of the intellectual property this movie was originally based on, their conversation that went viral last summer, where they live created a story online that went viral and was followed by tens of thousands, maybe millions of people.
And it's hilarious.
Yeah, which is cool because you kind of like put yourself in that situation in a realistic place, and you're like, would I be this, or how do I do? Yeah,
right. Well, I feel like that's how we watch horror movies today too, right? Like I feel like in the heyday, all the movies we grew up loving, they were new. You know, it's like people were experiencing Friday the 13th for the first time, like Nightmare on Elm Street and all that stuff. Whereas we're kind of more in hindsight with 2020, kind of looking back going like I rewatched Scream like a couple years ago, and I was like, I don't think I would be doing that. But but they're criticisms that I never had before, and so it was kind of fun revisiting these movies that we love and watching them through that lens. Like I talked about revisiting Friday the 13th, I hadn't revisited that in forever, and so it was fun having that lens. Like, well, I don't know if I would have done that. What if I did this instead, or what if I did? It's all just putting yourself in the situation, and that's what's funny about this movie is Sam represents. For me, he represents us inserting ourselves into the horror movie, whereas Chuck represents us when we're in the audience of the horror movie, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like Chuck is the spectator, which we often always are, where it's like, why are you walking alone at night? Like, that is the dumbest idea. Whereas Sam is who we insert ourselves into, like, okay, well, if I was in that cabin, what would I do? And what would I do? Da, da, da. So they kind of represent both experiences of watching a horror movie, basically.
Oh, I like that.
Well, you're walking a fine line, like you said, between the comedy and horror. And what was really interesting is the pace. I mean, it was just rapid fire. It was almost like, I don't want to say Three Stooges and the Marx Brothers, but it was just so fast and work. But did you, when you look at something like the original Halloween, it's paced very purposefully. It's building up to tension, but you're just like, joke, kill. Is that the dynamic you need to make this work, or was there a way to slow it down and still get the same effect?
It's a good question. I think that, I feel like we've had these conversations, like the three of us, but I find myself a lot of time, the horror genre has become so familiar to us, I think to most people, that when I go and see a new horror movie, I find myself, without throwing out any criticism, I find myself oftentimes in the first act going, I kind of know where this is going. I wish you would just kind of get to it. Like, I hate to say it.
Why make the audience wait for a shot that they know is coming?
Sure.
What you have to do is you have to scare them or make them laugh by something that they don't know is coming, but you don't have to drag it out for something that they do know is coming.
Yeah. But that was the most exciting thing about this, was starting the movie at the most exciting stage of what would otherwise have been a very linear horror movie, right? It's like, no, like, you're going to walk into this movie at the third act, and the main character is going to have to catch you up on everything that you missed, which was kind of refreshing for me, because that's just, it's a pace that you're not used to seeing in these movies. The setup is so important normally. And
The other thing we talked about was, and this is something people talk about when they create movies and television shows. You don't want the characters to be too far ahead of the audience, if at all, because that's some of the fun where the audience maybe thinks that they're, feel smart that they're ahead of the character. Mm-hmm. So here you have a character. You start in the third act, and he really is ahead of the audience, except he doesn't really know what's going on. Yeah. That's why it works. If he knew exactly what was going on, it wouldn't work, because then he'd be ahead of the audience for most of and then it doesn't.
But then you also because you don't want the audience ahead of the movie either, which was our other big struggle. Was just constantly teetering the line of we don't want the characters to be too far ahead of the audience, but we don't want the audience to be too far ahead of the characters. And one of our biggest debates, without getting into it, but the big reveal of who the killer actually is, when we were first putting this together, the big question was man, how long do we wait to reveal this? Because if we reveal it here, I feel like the audience is going to guess it. But if we reveal it here, I think it's going to be too early. But that was just probably the prime example of just how deliberate we had to be as far as just exactly what you're talking about. As far as the pace, the reveals, where's the audience at this point? Are we with them? Do we need to give them this now?
And then after you reveal that, which is so important, what new twists can you give that the audience isn't expecting?
Yeah, how do you keep them interested?
You don't want to reveal it and then you just play out like you expect. Okay, we revealed it, we're going to kill these 5 characters, this one survives, movie's over. Now it's we revealed it, so what's the new twist that they're not expecting? And all of that goes into making an effective horror movie.
No, it was good. I have a question for each of you. Hopefully fun one.
Oh, man. I'm nervous.
Me too. Obviously are huge fans of movies and cinema. Throughout the years, you've proven that. What are some of your favorite scenes from movies that have always stuck with you?
Wow. I'm not going to go first. I mean, okay, I can go. I know what it is. And you guys can think about it. Unless you already know. This is a hard question.
That's a really hard question. I have about 100 answers.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's
name a few of them.
Okay, so I think my all-time favorite, it's not really a scene more than it's a sequence of events, is the third act of Back to the Future 2. I talk about this all the time with people, but that was the first time that was to me when I learned. I'm obsessed with Back to the Future 2.
So am I.
Back to the Future 1 is, we share this in common, and it's why we're going to be really good friends the rest of our lives.
Because of Back to the Future.
That's right. Back to the Future 2 is a perfect movie. You can quote me on that. That is a fact. But Back to the Future 2 is my all-time favorite. And the sequence at the end of that movie is the reason why. And it's because when Marty's trying to steal the almanac in the midst of the third act of the first movie. It's the trippiest thing in the world. And it's when I realized, movies are magic. Because I love Back to the Future, but these characters that I love just went back to that movie. And now, he's having to get the almanac from Biff. He knows Biff's going to be over there.
Griff's in the third one.
Yeah, Griff's in the third one.
Yeah.
And produced.
No, Griff's in the second one.
No,
Biff is Griff in the second one, right?
Griff is the.
It's Buford Mad Dog Chan in the third one. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
That's what happens when you're born in '81.
Yeah. It wasn't the cowboy. He's the future Biff. The grandson Biff. What was it? Marty's having to navigate all the third act of the first movie to the point where he's even on the catwalk of the stage while he himself is also on the stage playing the guitar, and he knows that
he gives that
yeah. But even the fact that the third act of the first movie becomes a problem when Marty from part 2 gets knocked out by the door when Marty McFly from 1 runs out of the auditorium and the door smacks him, and that's how Biff finds him and abducts him. So the whole thing is choreographed around a third act I'm familiar with, and I now know as much as the character knows, but I don't know how he's going to do it. And I just remember watching this thing going this is the most unbelievable thing I have ever seen in my life. And it still is. I just can't get over that movie is amazing.
The third act of the first movie in the second movie.
Yeah. It's insane. Anyways, love that. So that would be my answer.
All right. Excellent answer. What about you guys?
So many.
I know, tons.
I mean, there's some things that when I'm flipping or on YouTube or whatever, I just have to watch it. I mean, there's one that I fucking love. Can I say that? Sorry.
Oh yeah, okay. Fuck yes.
The opening sequence of Temple of Doom when he loses the vial is just such a well executed sequence of shots. That sequence blows me away every time. And then I was reminded about that in Ready Player One, which I saw while we were shooting this movie. I saw one of our days off, and I was just in the theater looking at the screen going, holy shit!
Yeah.
Because it was just so well, it was just such a good story, well told. So I love that, shot-wise, but just, performance-wise, There's that roulette scene in The Deer Hunter that I have to watch, or Requiem for a Dream. Ellen Burstyn has the monologues that I have to watch if I see him. There's it's so hard to pick like favorite scene, but the stuff that Spielberg and Zemeckis do sometimes just blows me away. It's just so well executed.
Opening and Ted Woodman was amazing.
It's so good. I can watch that over and over again.
It's the only part of the movie that I worry about watching.
And I was actually going to say before you did Back to the Future, I love Act 3 of the first Back to the Future.
Oh yeah, the clock tower thing. Everything is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
It is super suspenseful.
Like when you talk about like the score, like there's this amazing thing where Doc, when he's waiting for Marty, he just goes, the music builds up and boom, damn, yeah, damn. I'm just like, they made all those decisions. This is amazing.
Damn. I think he said it twice on one point.
I'm a big Back to the Future fan too. I might be a tad older than these guys, so it didn't hit me at the same age that it hit these guys. But for me, I'm going to answer the question a different way. I think the most influential, film, genre product, the best TV or movie show ever made, was Twilight Zone.
I totally agree.
Favorite anything. Those episodes where Rod Serling, every episode works. It all feels like the same show, but you have episodes that are really scary, and some that are great science fiction that makes you think, and other episodes which are really sentimental. And every episode has a twist. Every episode has an unexpected twist at the time, and even now, some of them still work as unexpected twists.
Most of them work.
Most of them still work.
I've been revisiting.
It is so beautifully acted, so beautifully staged. They did them at relatively small budgets. That a few sets. Some of them are really just basically stage plays on in 2 rooms.
For sure.
But which episode?
Which episode of Twilight Zone?
Oh,
I love the Adam and Eve episode where Adam crashes down and you just hear him and he finds a woman, and at the very end her name's
you know
Eve.
who she is, and her name's Eve.
It was a really cool episode. I did that.
As a kid who wore glasses, it's Time Enough at Last,
Nice.
which hits you when the glasses finally break and your heart's broken for him. He's never wanted to do anything but read and enjoy storytelling, which we all like. So it's not just about this nuclear annihilation. It's also about storytelling and the enjoyment and celebration of story. And in life, sometimes you can't. And so I thought that's a great moment.
Nice.
But and Serling was telling stories that were whether it was the technique or the story he was telling stories about issues that some people are just starting to talk about today in movies. So to me, Twilight Zone has influenced every genre, television show, movie to come, and I can watch those again and again and again.
Me too.
And I love watching with my kids too now.
Well, so I've been revisiting them with my son. Yeah, and they've just I can't believe how much they hold up so well. They're amazing.
Yeah, each episode is just
the original Serling ones. We're talking about the original.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I mean, my son rolled his eyes when the Terror at 30,000 Feet with the big furry version.
The
William Shatner one.
Yeah. Watch the John Lithgow one.
Yes.
So now let's turn it back the other way. So we're talking about smart horror and dumb horror. You Might Be the Killer is definitely smart horror. I'm a big fan of Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon.
God, yeah,
what inspires you? What's your North Star and says this, whether it's current or classic?
Well, we got to come back this way, so you got to start.
I think the horror movie that, to me, is the scariest horror movie period is Kubrick's The Shining. And that
Big fan over there.
That is such a slow-moving movie, and very, in many ways, very little happens in the movie. I mean, the body count's small, and yet you're like this the entire time. It's a longer movie. It's not some 85-minute quick hit. I mean, you never move. You're like this the whole time. It's incredible.
It is. I think that's part of the showing somebody who's likable and family person, and then just completely.
It's all about the characters.
Yeah,
and that's what makes the horror
scary.
genre so good, because it really is about the character. It's not about the gore, and that is very little gore in it. I mean, compared to a lot of movies today, or documentary just in general. It's about the characters.
Yeah, I agree.
Well,
How about you, Griff?
What's the question? Most inspiring, or what inspires me about the genre?
What's smart horror in your eyes? What's your
Smart horror.
What's your go-to?
I mean, it's so hard to do something new. It's why I was so excited when Tom brought this thing to me, because I'm always looking for something fresh and something new, because I love this genre, but it's been done so much, it's hard to find something new. So I was just so excited when I brought this to me, because I'm like, holy shit, this is something new but still familiar. It's not just like so out there. But so anytime I find something new in the genre, and I'm a huge fan, I've seen so many. I outdid my video store when I was a kid. I had to go to a new video store because I successfully dubbed every VHS horror movie they had.
That's awesome.
So like when The Witch is probably one of my most recently favorite horror films.
The Village.
No, The Witch.
The Village.
The Village?
The Village.
Sorry, that's not with the two V's.
Just messing with you.
Why the Village?
Because it's
It's
not
two
about
V's.
you.
Oh, it's The Village.
It's The Witch, but
The Witch, okay. I never noticed the font. I was always looking at the silhouette of the woman. So like The Witch or It Follows, like something that's new that like that gets me jazzed up, and I tell everybody they got to see it, and I make my wife watch it, and she inevitably loves it. And even going back, anything that was new at the time, like Friday the 13th, that was so groundbreaking. It's like I love to, or Halloween, like I love to watch that and
First
just
Nightmare on Elm Street.
imagine the effect. The first episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, talking about an anthology series, is really dark and awesome thing. And that's from '54, and you watch that now, and it's still disturbing. And to think of the people who were watching it in '54 or '56 or whenever it was.
Yeah.
Television
Like
so
passing out.
safe.
Holy shit! This person just got murdered with a hammer on TV.
That's so funny.
Between commercials.
Yeah.
I mean, The Shining is definitely way up there.
Love The
Halloween
Shining.
is way up there. I know Halloween just premiered last night. But I think my big one, I mean, I love a lot of them, but my North Star is probably The Thing. The Thing, I think, is incredible. And again, it's kind of like Tom already said, it comes back to characters. It's a really cool character drama. It's like The Thing. One, it's like the most grotesque things I've ever seen in my life, but it's also simultaneously not, because the bulk of the movie is character interaction and character tension. And the other thing that really freaked me out about that movie was it was the first time I'd ever seen a horror movie that was just a bunch of grown men that I would have expected in any other movie to show up and save the day, that were all terrified. And that freaked me out, because my dad was a police officer growing up, so I was just kind of accustomed to like, all right, you got a like big buff dude in the house, you're set, right? And then I watched that movie and I was like, what? Like, they get scared too? And so that was amazing. I think Kurt Russell's amazing in it, and I'll watch anything Kurt Russell does, anything John Carpenter does. But The Thing to me is just pure perfection. I could watch that any day of the week.
Wilford Brimley's never been more terrifying.
Oh, dude, he's so good.
He is good.
I'm ready to come back inside now.
Yeah. the most terrified I've ever been was the defibrillator scene. Like when they did that and punched in, because like nothing can. And I guess that preys upon like the definition of horror a lot. But a lot of it is just like something that is happening faster and more shocking than your brain can even wrap itself around. And I'm like, wait. His hands just went into this guy's chest. His chest just turned into his mouth. That mouth just bit off his arms. The torso just turned into a spider. The spider's now walking. And I'm just like, so much was happening. Everyone's being like, what is going?
Well, the character had that line like, what the fuck?
Because
We're like,
makes it work.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, and that's one of the things with You Might Be the Killer that we just like, we tried to just focus on so much, was exactly that. Like, what do you say when you see this stuff, And like, again, spoilers, but there's a certain death that's very shocking, has a motion trajectory like that, and then Chuck is just like whoa, what did you do? And I was like, and that was kind of like the magic of the movie, in our opinion, was it's like, no, like people should reacting that way. And I remember like revisiting that movie and same exact thing, like, well, like, what the like what else do you do when you see that happen?
Exactly.
So he just wanted to be honest, and sometimes honest is funny, to be honest. Like with horror, I think, and that's another thing that we've really thought about with this movie, was sometimes what makes it funny is someone having an honest reaction to something horrifying.
You relate to it.
And then it's funny without being campy.
Yeah,
And
it's not
that's what we went
joke.
for. And we all love campy movies. We really do.
Yeah.
But that's how what this movie was. We wanted the humor to come from real moments and real human reactions. So we wanted it to be funny, but be real.
And it was successful.
And movies that are funny and unreal are great too. But that's not what this was. This has to be, every moment's got to play real.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much for your time. The world premiere is tonight, and see with the big audience is going to be a big thrill for you. So
we cannot wait to see it with an audience, because we have not seen it with a movie.
I can't wait. It's going to be awesome.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah,
thank you
we're
guys.
going to karaoke Huey Lewis Back in Time right now.
Sweet time.
Tell me, doctor,
We don't need the
where are we
lyrics.
going next time?
Well, this is Johnny Be Good.
Yes.